The day started like any other at the juvenile courthouse. The air felt heavy, a mix of nerves, quiet hope, and a sense that not everything would go the way people wanted. In courtroom 2B, a young public defender named Jackson sat beside her client, a 14-year-old boy named Darius. Darius was small and quiet, with deep brown eyes that held more sadness than a kid his age should carry. He gripped a worn sketchbook tightly, his fingers running along its frayed edges as the hearing began. The room grew still. The judge, a serious-looking woman in her 50s, skimmed through the case documents on her desk. Across the aisle, the prosecutor, dressed in a sharp suit and full of confidence, got ready to speak. Just then, the double doors burst open with a loud bang. Everyone's heads turned as a group of tough-looking figures strode in, their boots hitting the marble floor like thunder. It was the Iron Guardians, a local motorcycle club known by almost everyone in town. They looked intimidating at first glance with their long beards, tattoos, and rugged leather jackets. But those who knew them understood they had big hearts, especially when it came to kids going through hard times. At the front of the group was Grizzly, a huge man with kind eyes and a thick beard. He scanned the room until his eyes landed on Darius, who stared back at him, wide-eyed and unsure. The judge looked shocked and immediately asked, "What is the meaning of this disruption?" Grizzly stepped forward. His voice was deep and steady. "Your Honor, we're sorry for barging in, but we're here for Darius." We heard what happened, and we couldn't just sit back while a good kid gets punished for trying to protect himself. A quiet wave of surprise swept through the courtroom. Emma, who hadn't expected anyone to show up like this, felt a small flicker of hope in her chest. Maybe these men could help people see what was really going on. She'd been working on Darius's case for a few weeks now and had come to understand just how tough things were for him. He lived with his mom, Shanice, in a neighborhood where trouble was hard to avoid. Shanice worked 2 jobs, doing her best, but that left Darius on his own a lot. Even so, he wasn't a troublemaker. He was thoughtful and calm, with a love for drawing that showed in every page of his sketchbook. It was packed with detailed drawings, full of heart, full of story. But today, Darius was sitting in court facing serious charges. According to the police report, he had supposedly pushed another student, Marcus, down a flight of stairs, an incident that left Marcus badly hurt. The school had wasted no time labeling Darius as a violent kid with a history of problems, doing whatever they could to avoid taking any blame themselves. But as Emma got to know Darius, she started to feel like something wasn't adding up. There was a deep sadness in his eyes, one that didn't just come from this single moment. It felt like it had been there for a while. Sitting a little taller now, Darius glanced over at the Iron Guardians. Just knowing they were there gave him a strength he hadn't felt in a long time. The room began to settle again, and everyone prepared for what was clearly going to be a tense trial. It was clear now, this day wasn't just about a courtroom fight. It was about finally uncovering the truth behind what really happened, and how Darius had ended up in this situation. Not long after the school pressed charges, Emma Jackson, Darius's public defender, got to work building a defense. She started digging into the files, but something didn't sit right. The version the school had given felt too clean, too one-sided. She had a gut feeling there was more to the story, and she was determined to find it. Before the hearing, she managed to meet with Darius 3 times, and during those moments, pieces of the puzzle slowly began to appear. At their first meeting, Darius had barely spoken. He kept his head down, quietly flipping through the corners of his sketchbook. Emma gently tried to break the ice, asking him about what he liked to do. After a few hesitant answers, he eventually let her see some of his drawings. The detail and emotion in them stopped her in her tracks. This wasn't just talent, it was pain and hope spilling out on paper. She could tell this was a kid who had been through far more than he ever said out loud. As their meetings went on, Darius stayed careful and distant. His body language was closed off, his answers short, like he was afraid of saying the wrong thing. But behind his quiet voice and guarded eyes, Emma could sense something much deeper, something that had nothing to do with the fight at school and everything to do with what he'd been carrying around for a long time. During their third meeting, Emma finally managed to get past some of Darius's walls. With a calm voice and a quiet promise that he could trust her, he slowly began to talk about what he'd been going through. He told her about the nonstop bullying from Marcus and his group, the constant teasing, the pushing, the way he always felt like he had to watch his back. It wasn't just one bad day. It had been going on for a long time. As Darius opened up, Emma felt her chest tighten. The picture the school had painted of him as some angry, aggressive kid didn't match the boy sitting in front of her. What she saw was a kind-hearted kid who'd been backed into a corner, someone who had reached his limit because no one had stepped in to help. Each new detail made her more determined. She knew now that there was more going on than the surface showed. She needed to dig deeper, find people who had seen what really happened, gather proof, and show how badly the system had let Darius down. Emma started by learning more about Darius's home life. She sat down with his mom, Shanice. It was clear how much she loved her son, but life hadn't been easy. Shanice worked 2 jobs, days at the grocery store, evenings cleaning buildings. It kept food on the table, but it also meant she was hardly home, and that weighed on her more than she let on. When the bullying first started, Darius had tried to talk to her about it, but between her long hours and all the stress she carried, Shanice hadn't realized just how serious it had gotten. She told him to hang in there, to be strong, not knowing how bad it really was. She meant well, but she didn't know the full picture. As Shanice opened up, Emma felt a wave of understanding. The pain in Shanice's eyes was unmistakable. She looked like someone trying to hold everything together with her bare hands. Without thinking, Emma reached out and gently held Shanice's hand. It was a simple act, but it said what words couldn't. "Shanice," Emma said, her voice quiet but steady, "I want you to know I'm going to fight for Darius with everything I've got. I believe him, and I believe we can set this right. You're not alone in this." Shanice gave a small nod, her eyes brimming with tears. She had been holding everything in for so long, trying to stay strong for Darius while juggling the weight of keeping their lives together. Having someone like Emma step in, someone who actually believed in her son and was willing to fight for him, meant more than she could put into words. Emma felt the heaviness of it all, how much Shanice had been carrying and how much Darius had been quietly dealing with on his own. She knew firsthand the tough road single parents walked, the pressure, the long hours, the worry, and now it was clear how all of that had left Darius even more exposed at school without the support he needed most. Emma kept digging. She talked to Darius's teachers, a few classmates, and even reached out to 2 of his relatives. But most of the answers she got were all over the place. Some stories didn't line up, others seemed half true. The accounts from teachers and students often clashed, making it hard to find a solid version of what really happened. Then, during her search, Emma uncovered something she hadn't expected, a surprising link between Darius and the Iron Guardians. One of the bikers, Grizzly, the big guy who led the group, had a niece named Sarah. She went to the same school as Darius. Sarah was the kind of kid who stood up for what was right, and she'd seen the bullying happen with her own eyes. Sarah had told school staff about what Darius was going through, hoping someone would finally step in and stop it. But nothing changed. The school downplayed her concerns, brushed them off, and never took real action. It left Sarah feeling frustrated and helpless, so she turned to the one adult she trusted, her Uncle Grizzly. She told him everything. Grizzly, who'd always looked out for Sarah, listened closely as she explained what Darius had been going through. Her words struck a chord with him. It was clear this wasn't just school drama. This was a kid in real trouble and no one was helping him. Grizzly knew he had to step in. At the next PTA meeting, which Grizzly had been attending for years in Sarah's place, he made it a point to speak with Darius's teacher, Mr. Gerald. As usual, Shanice wasn't there. She had to work, like always, and couldn't make the meeting. Grizzly tried to get a sense of how things were being handled. Mr. Gerald admitted he'd heard about the bullying complaints, but quickly painted Darius as a hot-headed kid, someone who struggled to get along with others and always seemed to have a problem with someone. He said he didn't even know where to start with him. Grizzly didn't interrupt. He just listened. Concern etched across his face, but none of it matched the Darius he'd heard about from Sarah. She spoke of a quiet, kind boy who just wanted to be left alone. Grizzly urged Mr. Gerald to do more, to really look into what was going on and not wait until it got worse. Mr. Gerald, maybe sensing the seriousness in Grizzly's voice, assured him that he'd talk to Darius and the boys involved. He promised to keep a closer eye on things and to make sure Darius was safe moving forward. Grizzly left the meeting feeling cautiously hopeful. He wanted to believe the teacher would follow through and take the situation seriously. But then, that Monday, everything fell apart. The incident happened. Marcus was badly hurt, and Darius was suddenly the one facing charges. When Grizzly heard the news, his heart sank. He had tried to help, tried to get ahead of the problem, and now the very thing he feared had come true. At first, when Grizzly heard something had gone down at the school, he shook his head, letting out a tired sigh. "That poor kid's probably getting suspended," he muttered, trying to joke a little, not realizing just how serious it really was. Later that weekend, Sarah dropped by Grizzly's house. Curious, he casually asked if she knew anything about the kid who'd pushed the bully. Sarah's face changed. The lightness disappeared as she said, "He's going to court after the weekend." Grizzly blinked, confused. "What?" he said, his voice turning slightly sarcastic, like he thought she was messing with him. But Sarah wasn't smiling. She explained the whole thing, how Darius had been taken into custody and was now facing charges. As Sarah laid out the details, Grizzly's confusion turned quickly to anger. "That's not right," he said, his voice getting louder. "The school knew what was happening and still let it come to this. They should be the ones answering for it." His thoughts raced. He had tried to speak up, tried to get the school to take it seriously, and they'd brushed it off. Now a quiet kid like Darius was paying the price. It hit Grizzly hard. He couldn't sit by and do nothing. Looking more focused than ever, Grizzly turned to Sarah. He asked her for every detail she had, names, dates, anything that might help. He jotted everything down, his mind already working out his next steps. He wasn't going to let this slide. Not this time. Grizzly called on the Iron Guardians, his close-knit group of fellow bikers who were known in the area for showing up when it mattered. They had a long history of protecting the vulnerable, especially kids. He told them what happened, his voice filled with frustration and urgency. The Guardians listened in silence at first, but their faces told the story. This wasn't just another case. It was personal. They'd seen too many stories like this, too many kids left to fend for themselves in a system that looked the other way. They weren't going to let that happen again. So they made a plan, and when the day of the hearing came, they showed up. Together. A solid line of support for Darius and his family. Not there to cause a scene, but to make sure the judge, the lawyers, and everyone else in that room knew Darius wasn't alone. As the court session continued, Darius sat quietly next to Miss Jackson, his eyes fixed on the floor, shoulders slumped forward. It was clear he felt the full weight of the moment, far too heavy for someone his age to carry alone. Miss Jackson could see it in his face, the quiet storm of emotions he was trying to hold in. He was caught in a swirl of feelings. Shame for not speaking up sooner, fear over what might happen next, and a quiet anger bubbling underneath it all. More than anything, he felt betrayed. He was the one being punished, even though he'd only been trying to protect himself from the kids who had made his life miserable. As the prosecution laid out their case, Miss Jackson watched Darius slowly sink further into himself. The other side pushed a version of the story that painted Darius as the bad guy. They brought in Marcus and his friends, who claimed Darius was known for violent outbursts. They pointed to his grades and some notes in his school record, trying to label him as a troubled kid with a short fuse. The questioning was nonstop. The more they pushed, the more Darius felt like the walls were closing in. They twisted his words, made him sound like someone dangerous, like a kid who had attacked without reason. Sitting there, he could feel everyone's eyes on him, judging, blaming. But what finally broke the silence was when Darius caught sight of Marcus. He was sitting in the courtroom wearing a smug grin. That one look lit a fire in Darius. Anger, hurt, everything he had been bottling up started to rise. His hands trembled slightly as he finally spoke. With a shaky voice, Darius told the court what he'd been through. He talked about the bullying, the name-calling, the shoves in the hallway, and the days when he dreaded going to school. He told them about his missing art supplies and how it felt like no one cared. As he spoke, his voice grew steadier. He described the day Marcus ripped his sketchbook in half, the one thing he really cared about. It had been one of the worst days yet. Marcus and his group had cornered him, laughing and mocking him. Darius tried to walk away, but Marcus grabbed his sketchbook and tore it, piece by piece, while the others laughed. In that moment of panic and desperation, Darius pushed him. He didn't mean to hurt him. He just wanted it to stop. As Darius spoke, the room went completely quiet. In the back row, the Iron Guardians leaned forward in their seats, their faces growing more serious with every word. They could feel the weight of what Darius had been through, and it stirred something deep inside them, anger, sadness, and a strong sense of injustice. Grizzly, their leader, stood slowly and walked toward the front of the courtroom. In his hands were the torn pieces of Darius's sketchbook. Sarah had found them after the incident and passed them on to him. Grizzly held them gently like they were something precious. Miss Jackson stood again, her voice steady and full of purpose. She argued that Darius's troubles at school, his slipping grades, his outbursts, weren't signs of a violent kid, but the result of being bullied and pushed too far. This wasn't about a boy who picked a fight. It was about a boy who had been trying to survive. Then she called Sarah to the stand. As Sarah sat down, her voice trembled a little, but she pressed on. She told the courtroom what she had seen, the way Marcus and his group treated Darius like a target, day after day. She talked about the stolen supplies, the hurtful names, the way Darius was shoved and laughed at when no one else was watching. It had been constant, but even as Sarah spoke from the heart, Miss Jackson could sense doubt in the room. A single testimony, no matter how sincere, might not be enough to shift the opinion of the judge or the others listening. She looked around, hoping for a sign, some crack in the wall of silence. That's when she noticed Grizzly, still sitting in the back. He was looking straight at her, urgency in his eyes. She tilted her head slightly, unsure what he needed, but then she saw him motioning toward her, clearly needing her attention. Just as Sarah stepped down, Grizzly walked up to Miss Jackson and leaned in close. His voice was low but firm. "I need to speak," he said. "A while back, I talked to one of Darius's teachers about what was going on. I told them he was being bullied. They said they'd look into it, but nothing ever changed." Miss Jackson's eyes widened. She hadn't known Grizzly had stepped in like that. His words weren't just helpful. They could be the missing piece that showed Darius had been failed by the very people who were supposed to protect him. She gave a quick nod, understanding the importance of what he had to say. She called Grizzly to the stand. He walked up calmly, with the weight of the moment clear on his face. When he began to speak, his voice was steady and full of emotion. You could hear the frustration and quiet anger as he told the court about the teacher conversation, the warning he had given, and how nothing was ever done. As Grizzly spoke, the courtroom went completely still. The judge leaned forward, her brows drawn in as she listened closely. The jury exchanged quiet glances. Some looked surprised, others clearly upset by what they were hearing. Miss Jackson felt a wave of hope rise inside her. Grizzly's words had confirmed everything. Now she had exactly what she needed to show how badly the school had failed, to prove that Darius was never the problem, but the one who had been ignored for far too long. She rose to her feet and faced the court, her voice clear and firm. "Your Honor, the testimony we've heard today shows without question that Darius was the target of nonstop bullying. The school knew, and they chose to do nothing. And now, instead of helping him, they're trying to punish him for protecting himself." The judge, who had been following every word, turned toward the prosecutor. "Given this new information," she said, "and the powerful testimonies we've heard, I am dismissing the charges against Darius. It's clear he acted in self-defense. The real issue lies with the students who bullied him and the school that failed to act." The courtroom broke into cheers. Darius, who had been quiet the whole time, broke down in tears. Overwhelmed, relieved, and finally feeling like someone had listened. His mom pulled him into a hug, holding him close and whispering softly that everything was going to be okay. The Iron Guardians came over, surrounding Darius and Shanice with pats on the back, kind words and strong arms that let them know they weren't alone. Miss Jackson stood nearby, quietly watching. She knew this win wasn't the end, it was just the start. Darius had been through a lot. Healing would take time, patience, and people who truly cared. But with the Iron Guardians behind him and a growing circle of support around him, Miss Jackson felt certain Darius wouldn't be walking this road alone. He had a quiet strength in him now, and with the right help, he'd come out of this stronger than anyone expected. Darius's story and the role the Iron Guardians played is a powerful reminder of how much it matters to stand up for what's right and for each other. If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real stories that matter. See you next time.